The archive is a pretty curious place in the sense of like what it's presumed to do and who it's presumed to do certain things for. And for the communities that I've worked for, basically I saw the archive radically fail them. Indigenous communities didn't have any control over their cultural heritage, their histories, their family photographs. It was all held within institutions, and not only did communities not have control over that, they didn't have access to it. I mean, so you've got these histories of extraction and of deliberate theft, but you have a really real, tangible, practical problem for communities in relationship to how do they get control of their cultural material back.
One of the challenges that's emerged in this context is really how you think about intellectual property and what does it mean to own cultural heritage, what does it mean to own traditional knowledge, if that sort of thing is even possible.
The law doesn't care about the content. That's part of the challenge, that's why it doesn't work very well. It can only see things through a property lens.
There's a sort of a vagary in the system where because traditional knowledge has accumulated over time, it's not subject to the rules which allow an intellectual property to be granted over it. But as other researchers come in and start to write about those communities and write about their knowledges, then they can assert copyright over that material. And so you end up in a situation where outsiders, researchers, institutions hold the copyright over communities' knowledge.
At a legal end, you can't retroactively go and fix some of these problems, right? They're persistent and they're in many ways permanent over decades. What else could you do that could mark that material differently, that could bring cultural authority back into the record, and that could then allow communities to have different kinds of relationships around how that material could be used into the future?
Other Native groups started talking about Indigenous knowledge labels, and I said that's the way to go. That's the way it should have been in the very beginning.
The traditional knowledge labels, or the TK labels, are really digital tags that can sit alongside the digital assets or the knowledge. So as that knowledge is circulating around the world, those tags can be sitting there alongside to guide what appropriate behavior looks like.
Native tribes are starting to utilize it because it gives us more control over our songs, over our cultural material.
The Passamaquoddy wax cylinder recordings were made in Calais, Maine in March 1890.
These are songs from our ancestors that haven't been heard for 120, 130 years.
As a matter of fact, the first time I actually listened to the wax cylinders, it really, I was very, very emotional.
These songs were sitting in an archive waiting for us, and the right moment that they came was the right moment that we needed them.
The Library of Congress contacted us about the possibility of using the labels for the Passamaquoddy wax cylinder recordings. The record as it existed prior to doing this work was an impoverished one. We know kind of nothing. And then once you engage with the communities about that, it just opens up.
This is where the excitement begins. This is where we start getting excited.
We'd play maybe a sentence at a time, and then a word at a time.
I could feel the spirit, through these songs. And I just felt a real deep connection.
The process of the labelling ran kind of in a parallel way. It was like both uncovering what the sound on the recordings was and then thinking about where can cultural authority from the Passamaquoddy rest with these recordings and how can that be kind of woven back in.
Yoneha, 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 Yoneha.
It helps us to take possession of that song back instead of somebody interpreting what that song is and what it means.
What now exists in the Library of Congress is an updated record with an enormous amount of traditional knowledge that Passamaquoddy have shared, as well as 3 labels that are really visible and as close to the content as possible. So that's kind of the public-facing part of the record now. But what sits behind that is the digital infrastructure itself. Digital infrastructures are not neutral. Digital infrastructures carry the bias of all the other systematic frameworks around them. And when we start adding Indigenous names and Indigenous protocols and Indigenous rules and Indigenous permissions, we find out there's not a field for that. So we had to create a new field.
If you start to create the infrastructure that enables this sort of provenance information to be done, then you start to encourage and support researchers that want to do the right thing to do the right thing. In the context of genetic resources, you're in a very similar situation.
How do we create a set of labels that can deal with the biocultural information that is coming out of Indigenous community contexts?
In most places around the world, when you're thinking about genetic resources, what gives Indigenous communities rights in relation to them is the associated traditional knowledge. In terms of equity and in terms of benefit sharing, those things become increasingly hard to do if the right sort of provenance information isn't collected at the point where the projects are done.
That means that the second and third user, or the fourth and fifth users, have no information about where this data has come from.
What the label does is it creates a really clear pathway for that next user back to the source community so that they can then talk about what appropriate use, what appropriate benefit sharing looks like. When I'm thinking about how the application of the labels works within my community, Whakatohia, we've engaged in it in part because we've got interests in the marine space. We know there's a difference between the mussels which we catch and grow locally and the ones that we bring in from other places and grow on there. We've joined up with a research group and they're going to gene sequence not only the mussels that are on our farm, but the ones that are collected in recreational sites all along the coast. When the gene sequence for the mussel is generated, we'll attach the biocultural labels to that, so then that data is subject to the conditions we put in place through the use of the BC labels.
What's really exciting about the biocultural labels is that they start to allow us to scale this work in a different kind of way.
When you're dealing with collections of biospecimens that number in the thousands and tens of thousands, these collections have taken a long time to put together and it will take a long time to correct this sort of missing provenance information. But at least we're creating space for that to happen.
As we've kind of moved the project into different kinds of spaces, we've understood that researchers need particular tools and institutions need particular tools. And the notices are a system that allow institutions to mark records as well as to kind of mark their intent to engage around this work.
The work of the researcher and institution is to say there are Indigenous interests here. And we're making sure that those interests are transparent to other users. And that's where the use of the labels and the ability of the communities themselves to say these are the right labels for this context and these are what they mean to us.
one of the most powerful things that we've experienced as a community is gifts coming back from our ancestors.
If we think about the traditional knowledge as being shared as a gift and what the essence of that is and how that's maintained, and then the sorts of protocols that can be used to ensure that it's used in the right sort of way, that's what we see the labels sort of helping us do.
We are still here. It's amazing.